In the 40s, 50s, you can go down any time and, fill your bag up. We also had heaps of flounders that you can go down there floundering all the time. My uncles called buckets, which were shared out amongst the family. There we were able to get these big round pippies, and apparently there was only 2 places in New Zealand that had them so big like that, and one of them was out here. Across the railway line, not too many people in the pā knew they were there because, living away from the sea, they never frequented it as much as we did, but we would go across to the sea when the tide was out, across to the railway lines. We'd find mussels and oysters.
As soon as I could walk, Mum would go there at certain tides, and my father getting shellfish, pippies, boo-boos, and got a bit older. My father and uncles would go there with a net, certain tides, and you'd always catch a feed and fed the pā.
We used to go out with togs on in the summer, come back with our pants full of cockles, take our pants off, put them on the road to dry and have a feed of cockles.
As far as I can remember, even when I was young, as 5 or 6 and going to school, the harbour was a playground for us during the summer.
There were sand sharks and snapper used to come quite, close because they fed on the pippies.
I was born here in 1940, and most of my association with the foreshore is when we were kids. Swimming, getting pippies, and
if they're not catching eels, they'll be catching flounders.
Also got mussels, which were plentiful and sweet. The mussels are still there, that you just can't eat them anymore, but they're thriving. I cut a couple open about 2 weeks ago, and the smell was horrible.
We all as kids used to go down to the beach and go and get some pippies and bring them out and sit on the side of the beach and eat our pippies.
We didn't buy fish and seafood often. It wasn't something we did, it was something we went and got.
My life there was exciting for me because it was our playground out in the sea.
You weren't allowed to leave a mess. You had to collect your shells and put them down, on the side of the beach. That's what our old people used to make us do.
My grandfather was Matuaiwi Hurumuna, Solomon, and he was the mātāmua of the firstborn of all his Solomon brothers. And people used to think he was a bit mad going out there to get kai. They used to say he's, it's polluted and you'll get sick and all this stuff in those days. What I remember, probably when I was about 10 actually. And by that, but didn't stop him at all. And so from the time I was 5, when I first remember, to when I left Takapua here in 1979 to go to boarding school, and basically stayed out of the area from that time on. So up until 1979, yes, we had been fishing and gathering kai in the harbour all our lives, even though not all Ngāti Toa thought it was safe to do so because of the pollution. From the marae, a little bit to the left there was a bus stop right there, and straight out when the tide went out to the furthest point, we used to set the net straight out there, and so my grandfather used to tell me how the fish ran in that, and all the signs to look for over there, and like for mullet, for instance, there was a good night. There was certain nights. It was only once a month, one part of the month where we could fish for maybe a week. What I remember, and that was about the only time my grandfather, we'd have the net out there. So 3, 4, 5 nights consecutively, and that would be our lot for that month.
We used to go out with our aunties and gather cockles and mussels and what we call boo-boos, which was periwinkles. They were more out in the sandy part, you know, the mud flats. And the water line in those days went right down to the front of Pick and Save.
I mean, they'd drag a net and pull in over 100, 150 mullet at a time, you know.
How big would they be?
Oh, good sizes, you know.
In the early days, mullet, you could see them when they were there, they'd jump out of the water and everybody would, not everybody, whoever had a net who was home would try and shoot down there. But that's over 50 years ago, I would say. By the time I got to appreciate, you know, fishing, it all gone. The mullet anyway.
That Oniputo inlet area there was significant for us because it was always known that on Oniputo side were all nice, big, fat, juicy cockles, pippies. And because they were so big and so abundant, our old people named that place Ngā Kaumatua Tupiora, the eyes of Tupiora, who was the niece of Te Raupura. And that was known in ancient times as Ngā Kaumatua Tupiora because of the abundance of pipi and how big and significant they were. I mean, they were huge. You could fit one on a saucer.
As children, we used to walk along the beach because the water came. Where the main road is running now, that wasn't there either. The main road is not there now because the school grounds are there. But that was we used to walk along there on the way to Porirua school. We used to play in the sea there. We used to fish in the sea there. When we were kids, we would go floundering in the night time.
We'd prepare the slipway every year so that it would sort of last a few months, and we'd back a wooden boat down, a clinker, and get that into the sea and head on out to either, we would head to the reef, the main reef, Tukaapapa of Plimerton, or off the point, just off the point, and it seemed really deep water, but that's where Dad would choose to go for a free dive for paua and kina. And he would often set a net out at the reef and then come across and do a snorkel, and then we'd go back and bring the net back on our way back home.
The fish used to be what the boys used to have to go out with our fathers and catch the fish. That was what we were allowed to get, was a shellfish. But when it came to getting, as Aka said, pauas and kinas, we would they would go around to Titahi Bay and get get all that type of seafood for the huis that used to be on.
If we were going eeling, across the railway line there was just where the police college is now, there was two big lagoons. And so we would go down, when the tide's out, you can walk across where the river runs, it used to run out into the sea. Yeah. When the tide's out, you could walk across there, but when the tide's in, it was too deep. So when the tide's out, that told us we can walk across there, so we would walk across there, and that also told us that the lagoons were shallow. And we'd go across there and eeling in there as well.
With gaffs and spears?
Yeah, gaffs and spears mostly.
Interestingly enough, I bumped into a photographer out here by the name of Neil Penman, and he said that he just came from the harbour on a low tide and still captured some of the rings, pipi rings that we used to make. What we had to do was get all the pipis that we could, throw them inside these rock rings so that we could go and get a kai, or families could still get a kai when the tide was high. Or you'd fiddle around with your feet for these rock rings and then just dig inside them. Or what I did manage to see and experience was when our manuhiri left, in some cases, we'd go down and get a bag of pipis for them, and we'd find them quite easy if the tide was in, and put on in their vehicles.
We had counsel from our elderly people that when you go down for kai food, the kaimana, just take enough to feed your family, and don't forget there's other people who need some as well.
Like a lot of our old people couldn't get out, so we went and gave them some, but not all the time, just certain times when they wanted them. If the message ever got to us, we would.
Where Whitireia is now, just on the outside of Whitireia, where the sea just comes up to Whitireia, and right by where the river runs out there, when it runs out, there used to be a big mud flats out there. And so what we would do, we had car tyres, and we put them down there on the mud flats, and when the tide comes in, they would cover the tyres, and the conky eels would go into the tyres. And just when the tide is out, we know when to get it. You don't go out when it's too late, because the eels will get out of the tyres. So we used to go out there when we realised that it was not nice time to go out, and we'd go out and pick the tyres up and run them in, and the conky eels would be in the tyres. Yeah. That's how we used to catch them. We leave them the tyres because we weren't that game to pulling the conky out because they'd bite like mad.
When you caught them, you put them in the sand and scrape get a handful of sand and just scrape the slime off it, and then when you brought them home, you just put them in warm water and just get the rest off, and didn't need to gut it, and just fried it as it was.
The 1887 creation of the Porirua Mental Hospital, the asylum, that became a huge component in terms of the first actual pollution by industrial waste. Both industrial and human waste was poured out into the Porirua, into the Kinapuru stream. No or very little dialogue with our people here, who were hunters and gatherers there on this end of the harbour. And at its peak, they'd pushed out 150,000 gallons a day of effluent. So while that was occurring down there, we were still eating from the harbour up here and fishing and gathering. And very little dialogue, if any at all, because I think the Crown knew they were in breach of that 1883 Māori Land Court decision.
Space we used for whatever activities we needed. We used to walk along there, and Mr. Prosser used to train his horses along there as well. On the beach. And when they put that radio thing in there, it more or less cut that out. And when they put the radio mast there, the Second World War, and I think they put there, and around Titahi Bay, those radio masts as a safeguard for possible invasion from whoever. And once they did that, it changed the environment altogether.
1953, the government decided they were going to put state housing in this area, so they built a causeway from the township of Porirua towards Titahi Bay. It ends in Nonipoto, but they put a straight line through our harbour, and most of the stuff on the western side of the road they filled in.
Trucks just turn up one day, one morning, and start dumping rocks to form the foundation.
Watched that for a few years, getting higher and higher. And then a street was put in.
They encroached upon our harbour. The bits that they filled in were the best pippy grounds, the best boo-boo grounds, the little winkles, which there were 2 species, and the best places for floundering.
The front of Pack and Save, just across from Pack and Save on the footpath, there's there's some silver balls on the footpath, and that marks the water line. And Porirua Street, is it? Porirua Street.
Most of up here is all bush. When I was a kid, this was all bush, and we used to walk up here, go up there up to the bush, and walk through the bush, go over the hills, and down to the sea on the other side.
Down to the beach.
And then Americans came here, and they built all the houses up here, and the government built all the houses here, so the environment changed, and then changed because at that time they were short of houses. The houses was the priority, and so they just built wherever they could.
For Porirua, they call it the spice of landfill. Everything from the landfill leaches into the Kinepuru stream, which comes down into Porirua harbour, and it doesn't make the harbour smell very nice at all. That's another contaminant going in there.
I mean, I think one of the mistakes at personal was when they straightened the Kinepuru stream and accelerated water. You know, instead, I remember when they used to wind down from Takapu Road, all the debris would collect in each bend. Right. So you could actually pull it out there.
And the stream absolutely rushes down now, with nothing to slow it down. They've taken a lot of the species that used to live in the river away because they nowhere to settle, nowhere to hide. It's just like a funnel. That was a good place to catch eels.
I guess in those days it was accepted that people could come and tip their wastes into the water, you know, but in these big truckloads used to come in. No, it wasn't rubbish, it wasn't like paint, chemicals. Because we'd see the water one day blue, you know, the dyes.
Green, almost like slime. Green, it wasn't slimy, but it looked like that. And we went and tracked it down, and we told the Mackerel County Council where it came from, and we expected them to do so. Nothing happened.
You know, it's hard to give away something that you've been brought up on, you lived on, you were fed from there, and it was a hard thing to see it actually change. Yeah.
The place was polluted, and they put up signs that no shellfish is to be gathered from this area, and the signs were, you know, there was about 3 or 4 down this on the side, on the Titahi Bay Road, warning people that not to take the shellfish.
At that particular time, closed what I think was a terrible chapter in terms of the Crown not meeting its obligation.
I'm involved with Wakaama, and I've seen our children break out in boils, and they've been sick, a lot of stomach complaints. Part of their routine is to have tipping drills to learn how to steady their waka, how to cope in that situation. And so of course they get wet and they get sick. So there's the sea is not well, you know, the harbour, and so our people are not well as a result. Our kids love Wakaama, but they're continuously getting ill and breaking out in rashes and other complaints as a result of the seawater. I think someone came out and analysed the water and found that it did contain a lot of pollutants.
Be nice if they could dredge it. It's going to cost heaps, but, you know, it took all those years to contaminate it. It wouldn't take much. It'd just take a lot of money to fix it up.
Yeah, clean it out. If they can do the Thames, surely they can do the harbour.
It's nice seeing all the birds back on the water, you know, further down this way, because There was a time when you hardly saw many birds. Now there are many species of birds down on the water, on those mud flats. Yes.
I reckon it's going to take years and years, but yeah, one day to be like it was when I was a kid.
Have enough changes around here, but certainly we'd like to see the beach for future generations, because that is going to help them with their food baskets, is to see the beach all cleaned up.
If we expect to have the harbour here for us, then we need to look after it. I'm not sure whether government has that in mind, but for me the harbour is the beginning of the end of Porirua.
And to see it back in its purest form and to have another whippy again, I don't know whether I will. Out of the harbour will be an enormous tribute to our people.
So what I would like to see is the whole place beautified. We're constantly having working parties, groups of children and young people cleaning up. But you do that like 2 or 3 days in a row, and the next week it's all a mess again. Yeah, they're constantly fishing out shopping trolleys and all sorts of rubbish.
What we call pollution can be prevented through the expertise that's now on board in the collective, and through educating communities, because obviously what has an influence is what each household puts down their sink.